really good day. For today's project, we're going to be working in this A4 sized journal that I just made out of some large pieces of paper folded over and bound with some string. It's really nothing fancy, but I wanted a place to put just some random journaling pages that I've done, catalogue, and a place to sort of keep random illustrations that I've put together over the years, some old brooch designs, things like that. And sometimes it's sort of hard to find places to put those things. So I've made this little book specifically for that. And speaking of random collage ideas, one such collage idea I've had in my mind for a really long time is a 420 blackbirds baked in a pie, which kind of came to me when I was looking through some old cookbooks and found two really fun large pie illustrations, or photographs I should say. And I just had this image in my mind of like birds pouring out of these pies. And so we're going with like a bit of a pie theme, a bit of a food theme. In my mind, they're apple pies, and that sort of ties in with the page before. I'm going to try and keep a little bit of continuity from the previous page. Not that continuity is really something that I'm too worried about in this journal, but I had a little bit more of that. You can see that red gingham in the top of frame there, which is just like a chippy packet, bit of junk journaling ephemera. And I wanted to sort of use that in this spread too, so it does sort of tie back to the page before. One thing I did really want to include though, behind this image of the pie with the birds coming out of it, is a tablecloth. And the way I want to do that today is with a paper weave. Now, I've used quite a lot of paper weaving in my work recently. I really love it. I love the texture it adds to the page and just something a bit different. And though in the past I've sort of kept my paper weaves pretty simple, I do have goals to extend my range and sort of have a go at playing with all different kinds. So today we're going to be doing just a really simple one, aside from the fact that it is going to be quite large because I want it to cover the whole page. So that is something to bear in mind when you're putting your paper weave together. So we're going to start by, you just saw me measure up the size of my page. And if you liken it to a weaving you would do with yarn, basically you need a frame on which you would attach your strings that you weave onto, which is called your warp, which is what I'll be referring this back page as is our warp. And then you need your yarn to weave onto the warp. So essentially what we're doing is we're creating a backdrop, and then we're creating a bunch of strings that we're going to weave into our backdrop. So the first thing we're going to do is, so that the weave doesn't come apart, is we need to measure out a border. Now, to keep things very simple for myself, because it is so large, I've measured up basically everything in 1 centimeters. So a 1 centimeter border all the way around, 1 centimeter length warp strings, which is basically the cuts I'll be making vertically on this sheet of paper. And then to make sure that the actual weave in the end has 1 centimeter square little squares, I'll be cutting my weave strings to be 1 centimeter also. So keep everything simple for yourself. Obviously, the smaller all of these dimensions are, the more warp strings you'll have, the more weaving strings you'll have, and therefore the smaller your weave will be. Imagine if I was to double that and do everything in 2 centimeters, that means your squares, when you weave through the page, will be 2 centimeters, and you won't need anywhere near as many. In fact, you'll have half the amount because you've doubled the size. For this particular design, The main reason I've chosen to do something so small is because I really want that pie and the birds to stand out and be like the main focal point. And therefore, I want my weave to, as crazy as it sounds, because it is such a dramatic look, I want it to sort of blend into the background. And I find that the smaller you make your designs in the background, the more they sort of, I don't want to say disappear, but your eye doesn't see them first. Your eye will look at your focal point and then it will sort of notice, oh, look at all that beautiful woven texture in the background. If the squares were really large, you're going to kind of distract from your focal point a little bit. So all that said, I'm up to the point of using my knife and ruler to gently, because this red paper I'm using here is very soft. It's very fine, just a cheapy craft pad from the reject shop. But it's very, very soft. So I was very light with my knife because I was worried actually that it would catch on the fibers of the paper. And that's why these first few little strings that I cut didn't quite cut through. So I'm just gently easing them apart until you get basically this lovely, googly looking warp for us to weave onto. As I mentioned, those strings are 1 centimeter apart. And because I want my weave strings or my little squares to be all a uniform size, I am going to replicate that and create 1 centimeter width strings to weave onto my warp. Now, if you wanted to do them something other than a square, you could cut your weave strings wider. You could cut them irregularly. Just know that obviously if you cut them into a wider or irregular sized string, you're going to have something other than a perfect square or as close to a perfect square in the sort of overall tartan look of your weave at the end. So I decided as I was going along, I decided that it might be a fun experiment because I hadn't tried it before to actually weave the pattern on this coffee dyed paper into the weave as it is. So in other words, rather than just cutting the strings and popping them in a pile and just feeding them through in an irregular fashion, I decided to actually recreate the image as it is so that it would sort of not look perfect, because obviously you're not going to see the whole thing. There are going to be little bits and pieces covered up by all of the different bits of red that are going to interlace into your weave strings. And so that's when, at this point, I decided to lay them out in the exact order that I cut them. And you do have a front and a back if you're using pencil to lay out all of your dimensions and your maths. So if you decide to not use pencil to lay out all of your dimensions on the back of your paper, or if you do, you can rub them out if you need to use your weave front and back. I'm going to be gluing mine down, so I was happy to just scribble away and not worry about rubbing out all of my guidelines here. But you can rub those out gently, or not use them if you're not worried about them being absolutely perfect. You can just fire away, and then you'll have a double-sided weave, which do look beautiful in your journal as like a floating page. They look stunning. So and it's good to get good value out of all of this work that you're about to do as you as you weave through. Now, I'm pretty handy with a pair of scissors, so I did decide to use that instead of a craft knife to cut these. I do find I'm a little bit more accurate with scissors, and this paper is a lot thicker than the red sheet of paper. I find that using a softer, more malleable sheet of paper for your warp, and then some like a thicker or more sturdy paper for your weave strings works best for me. I find I can feed them through a lot easier, and can sort of keep control as you get closer to the top where you have less give room and you're like weaving. That's definitely a little tip that I have, is to use your softer paper as your warp, and then a sturdier paper for your weave strings. So just bear that in mind when you're selecting your papers. It's always something to think about, which papers are going to go which way and which papers are going to go the other way. Now, you can see me struggling a little bit here to keep everything all tucked in and in the right order. I actually decided, well, if I want it to sit up a certain way and I'm weaving from top to bottom, that I probably should start the other way around. So I tried to keep everything all nice and tidy there. And to begin, all we're doing is taking our first weave string and feeding it through the strings on our warp, under and over, and under and over. So pushing one to the back and then guiding one to the front as you work from one side to the other. It doesn't matter. It doesn't have to be left to right or right to left. There's no rules. Just do it however it feels comfortable for you. And just gently feed those paper strips through. Following the under-over method, you can see here that I found another little couple of strings there where the craft knife didn't go all the way through. I was very gentle when I cut it, just so that I didn't catch anything. And that is your first weave string done. So basically, you're going to just repeat that process until you've filled your whole warp, or not. You might not want to fill the whole thing. This might be a half-page weave. But the main thing to take away is however you start, over or under, you're going to start the next one in the opposite fashion. So in this case, I've started my first string over, so my second string I'm going to be starting under, and then basically replicating the exact same process but in an opposite way. So keeping it basically the opposite. And you will see if you've caught two warp strings at once, or something doesn't look quite right and you've got double. I mean, there's no rule saying you have to do it that way. If you want that lovely checkerboard look, that's how you're going to achieve it. But, if you're cutting your warp strings as rectangles or irregular shapes, then, you don't need to be as pedantic about following the over-under method. That is something that I'm doing here, though. And as I said, I'm going to try and replicate or recreate the water, or should I say coffee stains on the paper pieces that I'm feeding through. And so obviously the design has to line up. I made a decision early on not to worry about that until the end. And so at the end, what I'll do is I'll pull all the strings to one side and tidy it up. But to start out and to just, I had about 30 centimeters worth of strings. So if you're cutting those at 1 centimeter, then that is 30 strings that I needed to do here. So it was a little bit fussy and it took a while. So I thought, well, I'll save myself a little bit of time and get it all through and then tidy it up at the end. One thing I was doing as I was going along, though, was keeping those warp strings, the weave strings. I'm getting my W's mixed up here. Keeping those weave strings pushed down as far as possible. Now, because my warp strings are so long on this particular piece of paper, they are going to work their way up the page. That's just going to happen. They're just going to keep wiggling their way up. So the best way I find to give yourself as much room as constantly as possible, and to save yourself a lot of pain by having to keep or wiggle all of the strings when you get to the bottom. Well, I was going to say to the bottom, but I'm working from bottom to top. So when you get to the top, one way to save yourself a little bit of pain is to just keep wiggling them down. You can use when you're using a regular weaving situation like with yarn, you get a little tool that helps you to sort of push everything down. Today I'm just using the tips of my nails just to push everything down nice and gently, and just keeping it all tucked in, and that'll save you from having to, when you get to the very top or the bottom, depending if you're working from bottom to top or top to bottom, that'll save you a little bit of aggravation of having to go through and like shuffle them all down. So as you can see, I'm just going, and the last few rows that you've done will tend to sort of guide their way up. The ones close to the bottom by now should be all pretty much tucked in and in their right little spots. You'll be able to see if they're not quite right, because there'll be just like a little bit of extra red gap going vertically. So it'll look more like little red rectangles or whatever. On my design here, you can see they're red rectangles, but your design will probably be different. But the little rectangles will sort of give you an idea. You can also see that horizontally there seems to be like a noticeable red line between some of my weave strings. That indicates that you just need to shuffle those down just a little bit more. You don't have to be too fussy if you don't want to. The only reason why I am being a little bit fussy in this particular case is because I do want to sort of squeeze as many rows into this design as possible and keep the replication of the original coffee dyed design in the weave. If you're just using plain paper, or you're using a sort of tone on tone situation, you probably don't need to worry about it too much. If you just want to do it and have fun and not be too fussy, or it's just going to be a backdrop and you're not even really going to see it, it's just to add a little bit of texture, then yeah, don't worry about it. Just have fun and enjoy the process of creating this really lovely paper weave. And then you can see here I'm getting close to the top. I think I've probably got about 5-ish strings to go. And because you're now at this point running out of room to feed those through easily, I am sort of gently shuffling them down, and you can sort of see like, it's getting a little bit tedious a few rows back to keep those working evenly. So that's one of the things about early on, just keeping those all pushed down as much as possible and tucked in. As you get closer to the top, it can sort of be a situation where you've got to push it through the paper and then pull it back up and push it through and pull it back up. It's a bit fussy, I'm not going to lie. It's, in my opinion, it's totally worth it. I think they look beautiful when they're all like really full and lush. It does also add a lot of strength. This particular red paper, as I mentioned, is a very soft, thin paper. And so by adding this thick coffee dyed paper through it, it's actually strengthened the paper and does give it like a much more luscious texture and feeling. You can sort of see here why I was saying earlier about having your weave paper be the thicker of the two if possible. It does just help give it a bit of strength when pushing them through. I think I've just finished the final string. Yes, that is it. We're done. So the border around the outside is what sort of keeps everything held in place. You can sort of keep that in mind as you're selecting your papers, that the one that's around the outside, you're probably going to have that little bit of border showing. Something to think about in terms of your design for your page. Now it's just a matter for me of going around and sticking down all of those little tabs. And as I mentioned, in order to keep the original design intact, instead of trimming both sides, I decided to just align one side of my design paper with one side of my red paper. And that just sort of helped me to, obviously it doesn't matter which side you choose, but that helped all of those little details in the design stay aligned at that point, rather than me having to use my eye to sort of line them up when obviously half of the design has now been covered in red squares and it's not super easy to sort of figure out what goes where. So you're going to have obviously front and back strips to glue down on both sides. So you'll need to go along both sides of your border, and maybe you want to even leave those little tabby bits showing. Like, you don't need to trim them off if you don't want to. Certainly if you were doing a small weave and putting it right in the middle of the page, all of that lovely paper fringing that's sort of sticking out around the outside of your weave would look fantastic on the page. It's making me really want to try that, actually. maybe in the next journal. So now it's on to the super fun part. We've got our design for the background all finished in that beautiful paper weaving. And I sort of wanted to get a feeling for how we were going to actually put all this together. I've pulled out a whole different selection of ephemera that I thought would work for this. Obviously, it's a 2-page spread, so we're looking at 2 A4 sheets of paper. That's actually quite a lot of ephemera to fill a space of that size, particularly to keep visual interest and not have too many like dead areas or spots where there's large gaps, but also not have it be too busy. Also have it feeling cohesive and a little bit organized and fun. So this fussy cut of this particular pie was kind of relaxing. I don't know. Let me know in the comments. Are you a fussy cutter or no? Does it drive you bonkers? Does it actually cut your focus and take you completely out of what you're doing if you have to sit and fussy cut a whole bunch of images? I tend to really love it. I love how it looks on the page. And I think it does make it feel more organic when you've removed as much of the original image as possible. But I know it's not for everyone. Not everyone's into it. This obviously, as I'm saying that, I'm thinking to myself, yes. And then she had to go and cut all of those blackbirds out as well. So I did go and fussy cut these images from this is a little area from 2 pages from an old storybook, like a kid's nursery rhyme book that was falling to pieces. I did salvage it from a little area. One of the op shops that I go to, or thrift stores that I go to, has a little area where things that they don't deem like in decent enough condition for sale, they pop like a lot of books, because the books will have covers missing or pages ripped out, or all these little like imperfections, I guess, and at the end of each day, if those trolleys aren't emptied, they go to the landfill. So it's one of my most favorite places to salvage illustrations and books for my journaling. And these particular blackbirds just made my dreams come true, because, as I mentioned, I had tried to look for blackbirds in the past just to make this collage happen, and hadn't really. I'd started cutting some out, and it just never really came together. So to actually find a 420 Blackbirds piece of some pages with not only the illustrations but also some music notes and a copy of the actual poem as well was, it was just one of those crafty moments. I know other people out there will understand. It's hard to explain to people who don't really follow like journaling or paper craft or crafting in general, but when you find the thing you've been searching for, it's just the best. And speaking of the best, I have been having the best time here, just staring at all of the different ephemera, trying to figure out how to, when I sat down to record this video, I really didn't have a plan other than the fact that I wanted to make the 420 Blackbirds. I had my 2 pie images. I also, that New Yorker card is a birthday card from my sister from this year. I wanted to include that because I just loved the continuity of the red and white check and how it balanced just so beautifully. Obviously, because it's also a card from my sister, it makes the page feel just that even more special and personal. And, it's always lovely to include those really personal pieces of ephemera in your journaling or your art. I don't know, it just makes it feel like yours. And it also, I think, pushes you to do something special with that page too, because you want to really pay justice to something as special as a birthday card. I still have all my birthday cards from basically my whole life. I've got them in a little box there, and I've been slowly adding them to my journaling. I find I appreciate them a lot more and actually read them more frequently and look at them, and by including them in my journaling. So do you do that, or do you sort of stash the originals and maybe make copies for your journaling, or just pop them in? Maybe you attach the envelope for the card and then just put the whole card in an envelope so that you can do something else with it in the future. I sort of have a bit of a golden rule when I'm journaling, which is that instead of saying that, a piece of ephemera is too special, make the work that you're doing special by including those really special personal pieces of ephemera. I really do think that it helps to make your crafting feel worthwhile because you've got something special, and especially something unique where you've only got one. It can't be repeated. It's got a personal message from someone, or maybe it's a photograph or a piece of memorabilia from a vacation or something. That's going to be the most special to you. That's just something that I always say, like, use the good ephemera, use the special things, because they will make your work feel more special because you've used something that is so special to you. So here you can see I've actually taken that little bit of chippy wrapper that was from the previous page. Not from the same day, by the way. I did manage to get 2 sheets of that from 2 different trips to our local pub. Obviously you just clean it up and let it dry, and it's good to use in your journal. Again, it sort of helps with the, like, including lots of different ephemera from lots of different sources. I think will help give your page that really eclectic junk journal, but also just journaling in general. It's going to help your page feel that much more put together and collected. So I've got that little chippy wrapper. I did decide to go with the pie that had the apples around it, mostly because it had that little slit in the top of the actual image that had I don't know what this magic was, but it was the exact same size as the little strip of birds in the book. So it just sort of lined up and helped me out with a bit of an awkward arty situation where when I was looking at the original illustration of the Blackbirds, I was kind of thinking, well, what am I going to do about this line? Like, I'm going to have to sort of integrate that into the photograph of the other pie with the squiggly edge, integrate that somehow. And this sort of solved that problem for me, which was very, very much appreciated, because, sometimes you got the perfect thing, but how do you use it? I also added this really just a fun little paper doily, nothing special, just from a little, I actually thrifted a packet that had a bunch of different sizes and designs in it, which was a lucky find. And I just sort of get an idea of what I'm doing. And then I did actually take a photo with my phone so that I could sort of see what I'd laid out. And so I sort of don't forget, because I definitely do. And then it's just a matter of gluing everything down in the best way you see fit. I tend to use glue sticks for a lot of my crafting. I do find it more than sufficient. You will see me a little bit later on using some glue tape for some of the sort of glossier and heavier items like the birthday card. It's basically just up to your own discretion, like what type of glue you think will be required to hold down each item. Sometimes glue stick is fine. Sometimes you need something a bit sturdier like a wet glue or the glue tape. I only used a glue stick and tape for this project. See that little snippet in the pie there? How is it just so perfectly lined up with that bird thing? I didn't plan that. It just came together on the day because I actually had planned to use that pie with the squiggly edge around it. What a turn of good fortune. I mean, it must be the luck of the blackbirds. I don't know. So I'm just gluing everything down. This was a little bit tricky, but I thought, well, if I can give it a bit of structural integrity by using some sticky tape on the back, that's just going to hold those birds in place. And then just running over the edges of the image with a glue stick to sort of get everything all nice and coated in glue. You can sort of see what I was saying before about having a smaller weave and how it sort of really blends into the background and keeps those front images really shining and coming to the foreground. This was quite a glossy, heavy photograph that I'm using out of one of those big glossy retro coffee table cookbooks. Coffee table book? No, it would be a cookbook, I guess. Just one of those really large ones. And I just got that all stuck down. You can see the phone there with my little guide so that I could remember where I'd placed each and every one of those blackbirds as they're escaping that pie. So I just got those all stuck down. And I think I did decide after all of that the right-hand piece of paper, or the right-hand page rather, really did need that red vibrancy of that same red paper to sort of carry the design across. Or, it could have also been a piece of the coffee dyed paper. I did have some of that. That was a little project or paper that I'd stashed away for another project. But yeah, look, I just went for it and stole a bit from a different project for the weave, but went in with that same red paper just to sort of back or give us a bit of something to work with. I guess that is the one thing about those large working in such a large format. I do love it because I find that so many books these days that you find are large, and I do love using large illustrations and book pages and things, but it can, as I mentioned earlier, give you sort of dead spaces on the page, or things where it's just kind of like, how do I don't want to fill every single nook and cranny, but if you can imagine that top right hand corner, had that been just white, it sort of would have looked a little bit empty, I suppose. So I'm still like laying out the page here, just trying to decide how best to use all of the little ephemera pieces that I've collected here for this. Laying down some glue for the chippy packet. And the pie, do we think it's an apple pie? I mean, certainly the one on the left is an apple pie. I think this one probably is like a quiche or something. I don't know. But look, these are the questions that enter your mind when you're, journaling. I mean, I'd already gone to the effort of fussy cutting that first pie. It was going on the page no matter what type of pie it was at this point. So again, just triple checking that I like the layout of everything and how we're sort of moving forward, using a ruler to add, I love a ripped edge on a page. Use scissors if you have to. Ripping along the line just gives it that I don't want to say like necessarily a rugged edge, but it really does add like just a little bit of extra something. The edge being a little bit roughed up. I love it. Especially, look how I've managed to get a double roughed up edge there. I mean, is there anything better? Attaching the pie again with this is again another very thick, glossy book page. So quite a generous amount of glue to keep that all tucked in. This little cat image came from a Frankie magazine, and they have some really cute images in even just their basic articles. So I loved duplicating the cats. I think it sort of adds to that cat and bird kind of conundrum, like, the cat's chasing the birds, but then also just obviously giving a little bit of purpose and place for the birthday card being a black and white cat, having a secondary black and white cat. Just that little bit of repetition is nice. And then this is from that exact same book page, the phrasing of the poem, the 420 Blackbirds poem. And so now we've actually got some really nice repetition happening. We've got the blackbirds and an actual pie, and then we've got some music notes from the poem or the song, and then I've been able to then just include the text. So my 420 blackbirds baked in a pie dream has well and truly been realized at this point. There's more of that than is necessary, really. All right, so next I wanted to sort of keep just working on and building up the page with some different textures and some different layers, sort of start blending everything. I've just got some basic tissue paper here, which is transparent, so it is wonderful. If you haven't used scrunched up tissue paper held down by glue in any of your designs yet, please start thinking about it. It just elevates everything. And because it's transparent, you don't lose as much of your image underneath, and it's perfect for adding a little pop of color to black and white images, or vice versa, adding like a nice white, smooth, or not smooth, it's textured, like a nice bit of texture over the like the image underneath. If you've got a colored image and you want to tone it down a bit, adding a little bit of tissue paper over the top is next level. Give it a crack. So at the moment, I'm trying to figure out what paper / material works best for adding a little closure to keep that birthday card from swinging open. It wasn't causing me too much grief, but I wanted to pop some of those really cute cards, which I've had stashed away in my stash for a while. I wanted to include those as some journal cards, and so adding a closure to the page was really the best way to do that, and keep them all tucked in and obviously stop them from falling out. So what we're doing, and after like umming and ahhing and testing out several different options here, what I decided to do, and again, making sure we sort of as best we can add a little bit of that repetition from page to page. I decided that with the scraps from my trimming everything down, my trims earlier, that I had enough to actually do a little woven button style closure for the birthday card. So this is me struggling, because I didn't have a huge amount and I just wanted to use up the scraps and what I had there, struggling with success to create a little checkerboard woven closure for the birthday card. My goodness, does it add a little bit of texture, and especially on top of that amazing tissue paper. I mean, I don't know if you can tell, but tissue paper, I am such a fan. So adding not only repetition but some more texture to this page was amazing. So just using a knife to cut a little teeny tiny hole in there, and then obviously a brad is the best way to secure that to the page. I went with black because that just seemed like the most natural choice, with the black cats and the black birds and the black music notes. Black just seemed like a natural choice here. And because I do plan to journal over the top of this, I just added a little bit of sticky tape over those little metal bits to hold them in place and stop them from snagging in the future. And my goodness, that little button, how it added just what that little funny little space in the corner, just what it needed. Now, I did decide, and you won't see it in this video because I did go back in later on. I added 2 journaling cards to this spread, and one of them I backed with this, again from a Frankie magazine, this cute little bubble blowing image. And look at that. See, this is what I'm saying. Like, every page in the Frankie magazine has something you can use, especially if you can get old ones that have sort of seen better days and you can sort of salvage like bits and pieces out of them. I used that to sort of back the image with the girl in the little bear mask. And I mean, there's not really any reason I chose these images other than the fact that because that birthday card is from my sister and these images very much reminded me of her. That's kind of why I chose them. They are also in line with the general color scheme we're going for here. So, I mean, at this point you could do some inking on the cards. I actually don't, at this stage, I don't have any of that in my stash. So, I should get some at some stage really, but I think it looks just as cute without it. So we're putting that in on the first journal card. For the second journal card, I was sort of umming and ahhing. I might even go back and do this, actually pop that in. The color of the little yellow tabs, these are more of those black, see that little folder there? They're all the blackbirds I've stashed as I was trying to figure out what to use for this project. So I'm just going through all the bits and pieces I sort of had tucked away, and like, what else can I tuck into this little cat card pocket that I've created? The bookmark I really loved. I thought, I mean, pink and red with white, but pink and red are just a color combination made in heaven. I am obsessed. So I was really trying to make this work, and ended up not. I just ended up giving it away. And this is the point I was making earlier, that this little love postcard, which is by the brand Love Hate, I have one of their brooches. This postcard on the back, eventually I did turn it into a journal card for some journaling. So as you see it in this video, it's just got the back of the postcard as it would be in real life, in the wild. But I did end up going in and eventually adding some just some plain paper so that I could add some personal journaling to that in the future. So I'm just using some really cute red paper washi tape to add some little tabs to the journal cards. And then these little sticker numbers, I mean, you can see how many I've rated just for the little black circles. I'm kind of obsessed with those. That also creates a little bit of repetition with the brad once again, like it sort of ties it all together, because those little flags you'll sort of see sticking out of the top of the card pocket, or card, what do we call it? Closure. And then in her top, the little girl wearing the bear mask, she did have some light white spots on her coat, or on her shirt. So I just went through with my little white Posca and added some white speckles around the page. This is just sort of adding the last few little bits of personal detail, a little bit, something a little bit drawn in, and you know, really at this stage you could do whatever you like. I added some more music notes and added like a little section of music bars down the bottom. But here she is, our dream realized. Finally, the 420 Blackbirds vision has come to life. Finally. Let me know down in the comments, which is your favorite part of this page? Would you do something similar yourself? Did you enjoy the paper weaving tutorial? I will be doing a lot more of those in the future for different projects, but I hope you've enjoyed this double page spread, and hopefully I will see you again very soon. Have a wonderful rest of your day. Bye bye.